live really quickly.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Very happy to be live with Joanna Dodd. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your books to get us started.
Hi, I'm really pleased to be here. So my name's Joanna. I've literally just had my first ever book published yesterday, so it's all feeling very new at the moment. It's a psychological thriller. It's called The Summer Dare, and it's about a group of friends who took part in a dare 25 years ago when they were at school together. And something terrible happened, and they've all lied about it ever since, but it's about to catch up with them in a really dramatic and quite scary way.
Yeah, my copy arrived yesterday on my Kindle. It's like yesterday was publication day. And I'm not at the end yet, but we aim never to give spoilers away in the group. So it's like I'm about 70% in.
Okay, interesting.
I was saying to my husband before I came up, it's kind of giving me Pretty Little Liars vibes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it kind of is in the same territory, definitely. I kind of wanted to create a world in which you're not really sure who's lying about what, and the kind of territory is constantly shifting, because that's one of the things that I like reading, I guess. So that was very much what I had in mind when I came to write this.
Yeah, and they're like so you've got quite a small group of sort of friends that are the main characters, haven't you? And they're quite they're all bound together by what's happened to them, which is quite an interesting
exactly
to start with.
They're kind of stuck with each other, I guess. Like maybe they would have stayed friends anyway, but probably they wouldn't. But this thing that happened to them that they can't actually even talk about anymore because it's been buried for so long and it's such a bad thing. It's still the kind of thing that holds them together, and they can't really escape from each other. And I guess I was quite interested in the kind of bonds of friendship and how they develop and how they can be formed by bad things as well as good things, I guess.
So did you saying this is your first book? What drew you into sort of taking the plunge into writing?
It's my first published book, so I've tried to write before. I've wanted to be a writer for a very long time. I love reading, and I guess that's the main thing that sort of motivates me to want to write. I love reading crime fiction of like all kinds, psychological thrillers, but also all other kinds of crime fiction as well. And previously, I've tried writing a historical crime novel, which was great fun to write, but it was actually this one, which has obviously a present day setting, although it does jump back partially into the past, that ended up getting picked up by an agent and then a publisher. So yeah, that was like I guess just literally like a dream come true, because it's something I've wanted to do for a very long time.
It must be really exciting to sort of get started with that. What has been, told you I'd ask you this again. What has the reaction been so far? I know you're only a couple of days in, but
yeah, so it's been so exciting. People have started to get their kind of pre-ordered copies and have been sharing with me sort of their theories about what they think is happening as they're going along. And to be honest, just the excitement of having created a world and had it in your own head, and then suddenly it's out in the wider world and other people are talking about it, is such a brilliant and exciting thing. I've really loved sort of getting people's messages on social media, and for the people who know me, sort of the emails and other messages I've got about what they think is happening. It's been brilliant. So yeah, such an exciting week.
Has anyone got it right as they've gone? My theories are changing constantly.
Okay, good. That's very much what I want. No, there have been some great outlandish theories, though. So things that I didn't even think of, where I was like, "Ooh, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that." But yeah, no one's quite got it right yet. I'm sure they will. I'm sure I haven't created an unguessable book, but yeah, it's just fascinating, because I think when you write this kind of book, you're so familiar with the plot yourself that you stop being able to see almost where the twisty bits are, because you're so you've read it so many times. So it's exciting for someone who is utterly unfamiliar with it to kind of talk you through what they think is happening. It makes you see it in a different way, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine. Does it? I mean, that must be really interesting actually, because you probably lived with those authors for those characters for quite a while as you've written it, and it's like it must be quite a surprise, like going back to it, or seeing like other people's thoughts about them.
It is strange, yes, because as you say, you do spend a lot of time with those characters, not only when you sort of write it the first time, but then once it does get picked up by a publisher, there's a whole editing process. So you read it lots and lots of times with other people's comments on it, make lots of changes, and after a while, I think you kind of become so involved in the detail of it that you stop seeing the big picture. So yeah, hearing other people reading it and hearing their theories helps you, I think, to just start seeing it afresh. It's almost like you've had a chance to put it to one side and then it's come back to life again. So that's been very exciting.
Did you have a launch event? Did you have like a launch?
I'm going to have a launch event on Monday, which will be exciting too. So it's been a week of lots of exciting things happening, and that'll be really nice. It's mainly sort of family and friends, just because, again, this is something I've wanted to do for ages. So it felt like a nice thing to be able to celebrate.
Yeah, that so it's not going to be at like a book. You're not going to a bookstore.
It is actually the bookstore. It's a local bookstore. I live in London, and I'm going with like a little independent local bookstore. So that'll be really nice as well.
Yeah. It's so when you're and then you go into Harrogate.
Yeah, very much looking forward to
that. Do you have any like bookstore events or panels or anything planned?
I've booked some events to go and listen to. Alex Chowdhury, who writes psychological thrillers and is published by the same publisher as me, Hera, is doing a talk about psychological thrillers. So I'm definitely going to go along and listen to that. I think that'll be brilliant. And mainly I'm just hoping to meet some other authors and readers. And it sounds like a really sort of sociable occasion. So really keen to have some good conversations and yeah, just meet some new people, I think.
Yeah, it's always good when you like have your book out there to go and.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's good timing as well. Literally a couple of weeks after publication day, so that'll be good.
So, what led you to finding Canelo as a publisher? Sure.
They were so I first of all I found an agent, and then obviously she sent it out to various different publishers, and their enthusiasm for the book was really sort of inspiring, and I felt like right from the start they just kind of got what I was trying to do, and they were really positive about what they could do with it and excited about it. And again, if you've written something, it's quite a solitary process, so it's nice when you get that excitement of other people, and I think that just really inspired sort of confidence in me. And they've been absolutely brilliant to work with throughout. They're such a good team of people, so it's been a really positive process. I've got nothing to compare it with because I've never done this before, but from talking to some other people, I think I've had a really good experience with them. They've been brilliant to work with.
Yeah, you're with a good publisher. We're a big fan of them in the group. They don't.
Yeah, and then I've been reading some of the other things that they published and some of the other writers they published, and yeah, there are some really great books out there. So that's kind of inspiring as well, I think.
Yeah, I can't think of I've interviewed lots of Canelo authors, and I can't think of a book I've read that I've not enjoyed.
Oh, that's really good to hear.
By them, like it's a sign of quality for sure.
That's great.
Them being there. I'm intrigued as you've got kind of two threads to the story, haven't you? You've got the story with like the friends, and then you've got the story with your like the old film actor.
Yeah,
I quite like that sort of thread of like a bit of Hollywood glamour kind of running.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like that bit. Yeah, that was that bit came quite late on in the process of thinking about it. I think I knew that the main story needed a ghost story element to it because, again, without too many spoilers, there's a kind of haunted house involved in this story, and I kind of wanted a ghost story that was a convincing ghost story. But the more I thought about the ghost story, the more I realized it was kind of a story in itself. The events behind the ghost story, anyway, it's not. I should stress, it's not in any way a supernatural book. All the crimes are very firmly committed by actual people, not by ghosts. But I guess I got quite into that ghost story and thinking about the kind of people behind it. And as you say, it's set in the 1920s and features a silent movie star and a dramatic death that happens at one of his parties. And it kind of weaves its way through the book. And there are parallels between that storyline and some of the things that happen to the friends in the present day. And some of the secrets that they're grappling with are also secrets that were being grappled with in this earlier storyline.
Which is quite a clever way of linking them together, isn't it? And there's a lot of sort of love of drama and
yeah,
like,
I hope it works. It was very much the idea was that the stories would complement each other, and sort of similar themes would come out of them. And hopefully at the end, again, don't want to give too much away, but hopefully they come together in a way that sort of makes sense and is quite satisfying as well.
Is that quite hard? So when you're doing it for a first time or a first published time, is it quite hard to know where to hide, like plant those clues for that? Because it's quite an intricate plot so far. Like you're kind of dropping clues in, aren't you? But it's not very obvious, like where it's going. So it must be quite tricky, I would imagine.
It is, I guess. I guess the hardest thing is because you know what's going to happen. It's hard to know how obvious your clues are to the reader. And as you say, you kind of want people to get to the end and, you know, to be surprised, but also not totally taken aback. You want them to be able to think, oh, that's why that happened and that's what that meant, rather than like, where did this come from? So you want enough clues that when someone gets there, they kind of understand and that makes sense. And I think that's quite hard to judge when you already know what's going to happen. And I guess that's where sort of early readers who you trust are quite helpful, because you can say to them, what did you think was going on there? Or, you know, is that too obvious or not obvious enough in some cases as well? And I guess there's also an element of layering. So I tend to come up with a plot that involves some twists, and then probably write a first draft, but then I will layer more in as I go through it a second time. So that's kind of, for me, a helpful way of sort of balancing it out. I've got the basic structure to start with, but then it'll become more intricate as I go back to it.
So did you have a good team of early readers to help? Or
yeah, I did. I had some really great sort of feedback from people I trust and whose writing I admire, and some published writers who were really sort of generous with their time as well. So I think that kind of feedback is incredibly helpful, especially when you're just starting out. And one of the best things about trying to get published has been sort of discovering how generous other writers are and how much they are actually prepared to, you know, give you their time and feedback. And I'm really grateful for that, and I really value it, because it kind of gives you a confidence boost as well, I guess, because trying to be a writer can also at times just be quite depressing. I've had a great, exciting week, but getting published can feel like, you know, a lot of rejection and a lot of knockbacks. And I think having that kind of feedback from people you trust and whose writing you admire is really helpful to keep you motivated and keep you going.
Yeah, it really must be. What is your plans for next? What do you plan to move on to?
So I have a 2-book deal with Heroes. So I've already written a draft of a second psychological thriller, which will hopefully be published in spring of next year. It's obviously it's a different story, same genre, and that's sort of mainly what I've been working on over the past sort of 6 months or so. Alongside sort of finishing off the edits on this one. So that's been really exciting as well, because it's the first time I've ever written anything where I've got an actual kind of commission to do it. So it's been a really interesting experience. I've written much faster than I would normally, I think, because there was a deadline. But that's actually, although it was sort of terrifying along the way, quite helpful because it also focuses your mind. And I think the fact that I wrote more quickly than I would usually hopefully resulted in a maybe slightly more coherent and sort of flowing first draft. I don't know. We'll have to see. I haven't had any feedback yet. So remains to be seen.
So we ask this question a lot. It's one of our favorite questions. If this got turned into like a Netflix adaptation, what character would you like to play?
That's a great question. I would like to play. I think I would probably like to play Lucy, who is my main character, basically, because she's kind of the person driving the story forward. I mean, she's also the person to whom sort of bad things are happening in the present. She's getting these mysterious messages that she doesn't know who they're from, but she thinks they're from somebody who knows what happened all that time ago. So she's kind of the victim of this, but she's also driving the plot forward because she's very determined to kind of find out what's at the bottom of this and to make it clear what is actually going on. So I think she's quite an active protagonist, but she's also got the stakes are very high here for her. She lied about something, and her husband, again, not to give too much away, is quite tied up with this as well, and she's lied to him about it for a very long time as well. So I think that would make her a really interesting character to play.
Yeah, I think I'm picking her. Like, I'm really curious to see how it's going to turn out. Because I think like it's kind of like you've almost got another book in like what happens when all the things have come out, haven't you? And like what happens to all the people after all their secrets are revealed.
Exactly. There's a kind of unraveling because they've kept all these things sort of under wraps for such a long time that as it starts coming out, all kinds of other things come out with it, and their lives in the present, which look from the outside like quite enviable lives, start unraveling fairly quickly, and they've got all these other things to deal with. And as you say, there's then the kind of the fallout from when it becomes clear what actually did happen all that time ago. There's how to move on, if it is possible to move on from that as well.
So would you write more with these characters, or are you going to move on and write something else?
I think I'm done with these characters. So it was really fun writing about them. I loved sort of spending time with them, and I hope sort of that comes across when people read it. But I feel like that their story is kind of told in this book. And actually, now I'm talking about it, there would be something quite interesting about what happened next, because there are weirdly the uncovering of secrets creates new secrets, and I suppose that is the potential to explore how that kind of plays out, especially in the next generation coming along after them, because quite a few of my characters have younger children. But yeah, for the time being, I'm on to kind of fresh ideas. I've got a few other things that I'd like to write, so I think it'll be a while before I come back to this.
Fair enough. What are you working on anything right now, or?
So I'm now trying to come up with some ideas for book 3. I'm just kicking around lots of ideas, doing lots of sort of scribbling down and a bit of research, because sometimes that helps sort of prompt ideas in my head. So yeah, I'm always trying to have something on the go, just keep going. The ideas stage can be quite a tricky one for me. As soon as, I kind of know when I've got that, but it takes quite a long time to work through ideas, and then it's almost like the starting to write bit is kind of when all of that comes out. So this is the point where I'm still sort of kicking around different plots and different ideas and different ways of working it out.
Are you going to stick to sort of keeping them sort of quite closed group sort of thrillery, or do you?
Yeah, I think so. So the second one that I've already written is very much a closed group. It's set in a very small village, and features a very small cast of characters. So it's quite claustrophobic. The third one is too much at the idea stage to be sure, but I think there's something about this kind of book where having a fairly close, sort of a tight group of people who think they know each other, but do they really? And how might those tensions play out is something that I'm really interested in exploring. And I guess it dates back to also the whole like classic Agatha Christie closed, like there's 7 people and one of them's done it, and how does it all play out? And which I, when I was a kid, I used to love reading those kind of books, and I still do. So I think there's an element of that in there for me as well.
It's a really popular genre as well, isn't it? So a lot of people like those kind of
It is, yeah.
kind of novels, and locked room mysteries again are like very popular at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest in that kind of the sort of the puzzle element of it, and I guess psychological thrillers just do that puzzle thing in a slightly different way to maybe classic crime or cozy crime, and it's just a different way of presenting that. The question might not be who done it; it might be like what happened, but there's still a puzzle element that you're trying to work out and trying to pick up on the clues along the way, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your writing? So you've got your idea. What's your writing style like then?
I tend to. I'm a person who starts at the beginning and carries on until they get to the end, pretty much. So before I start writing, I'll have an idea of exactly what's going to happen, and the only way I can do it really is just to keep going and not to go back and read too much at that point. And then I'll get to the end and then leave it for a few weeks, and then I'll come back and probably have lots and lots of different ideas and rewrite bits of it and maybe move bits around. But the initial draft, I think just getting something on the page is really helpful for me. So I tend to not worry too much about what that something is. I just need to get something out there before I can come back and make it better.
Sorry, can't think about where I was going with my question.
Sure.
It's really hard. There's so many things I want to ask you about this book, but because it's like such a close knit group, and we don't want to give spoilers away, it's like really hard to say. I'm going like I can't ask that question. Like I keep coming up with a question, going I can't ask that one. Like it might give away a spoiler.
I guess there's quite a lot of sort of twists along the way. And yeah, one thing for me talking about it is to try and be conscious of not giving too much away as well, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone.
Have you practiced kind of doing the author things of like giving readings, or have you like selected any little bits that you want to like that you for future events? We don't ever ask authors to do that. I'm just wondering if you're prepped for.
I think the prologue is probably the most readable bit, partly as you say, because it's hard to pick a later bit without, giving too much away. And the prologue, I think, sort of gives you a good sense of the kind of key themes of the novel. It's probably a lot darker in tone than most of the rest of the book. But it kind of sets up those key themes of friendship, betrayal and trust, and that kind of suspicion of whether things are really as they seem or whether there are other things going on under the surface that that are about to come out and explode in a really unexpected way.
And I think that's quite interesting being there, because you then, when you're reading the book, you're trying to work out like where that went. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and hopefully by the time you get to the end, you will have those answers. So actually, although I said I think I start writing at the beginning and I wrote until I get to the end, the prologue did probably come quite late on in my drafting. When I wrote a first draft, I just started with the first chapter. But for reasons that will hopefully make sense when you get to the end, I think the prologue does sort of frame it really nicely, and gives you a kind of a sense of, although there's a lot of lighter bits in the book, there is something actually quite dark and sinister at the heart of it as well. And that's, as I think you said, you're about 70% of the way through, so it's probably about to get a lot darker at the point you're at, I think.
Yeah, I'm on my Kindle, so that's why I'm giving you a percentage.
Yeah, okay, I have that too. You're not sure what page you're on, but you've got a sense of.
I have no idea what page I'm on, but it tells you, doesn't it? Like
Yeah, exactly.
your percentage through the book. And
Yeah.
I started reading it yesterday, and I was like, I've got to try to read enough that I can talk to you about it.
Well, thank you so much.
So, and then I got quite addicted to it, and I was like,
Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad.
but then I didn't want to take it out today because it was raining, and then I've been out all day, and I was like, I don't really want to take my Kindle out in the rain.
No, I know. It's just depressing.
Yeah, so I had to leave it behind, which is quite sad.
Well, I
But
hope when
almost
you get
finished.
through that final 30%, all your questions are answered.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I did get to go to the bookstore, so you know, it's the upside of being out all day. The downside is it rained.
Yeah, definitely. It's not very summery for the summer day. I was kind of hoping for some more summery weather.
Why? I mean, it's an interesting title. Did you come up with that yourself, or is that all?
I think it's fair to say no. I definitely didn't, and it was the title that the publishers came up with, and that I really liked as soon as I heard it. It turns out I'm not very good at thinking of titles, but actually having talked to quite a few other writers, it seems like very few books end up with the original title that the author had in mind. And like I say, I like this one as soon as I heard it. And also, I just think that publishers are going to have a good idea of things like that. That's their business. They sell books. So I went with their suggestion, and I really love it now. And it's hard to kind of think of it in its previous. It's had several different titles along the way, but it's kind of hard to think of it in its previous versions. And that seems like the most natural title to me. And I think it kind of, again, it sets up the kind of what's the core event behind all the other things that happen. And I guess one of the things I'm interested in the book is how small things can lead to much bigger things. And you might do something when you are, a child that has consequences that sort of ripple down through the years for all kinds of people. And I guess I'm interested in the extent to which doing one wrong thing could sort of change your life and everyone else's life, even if you did that one wrong thing when you were a comparatively young child. And in this case, it's the dare that they all take part in when they're at a summer camp. That is the thing that's going to transform their lives, but also the lives of all kinds of other people around them. And it's not just the guilty who are affected; it's everyone who has to live with the consequences of sort of what happened that night, and the fact that they choose to tell a lie about it afterwards.
I think one of the shocking things that people don't always realize is how like young you can be to be charged with crime as well.
Yeah. So interesting to me. I think in England and Wales, I think the age of criminal responsibility is 10, isn't it? And in Scotland, it's 12. All of which, it does. When you think about sort of 10-year-olds that it's kind of a mind-boggling thought. But equally, sometimes you read about actual crimes committed by young children, and it's it is hard, I think, for society to know what to do in that situation. And obviously, like, the sentencing system treats children differently to the way it treats adults, but it still holds them sort of culpable for what they've done. And although a lot of the things that happen in this book aren't criminally that they're not crimes as such, but they are things that have terrible consequences. And I guess I was interested in the extent to which, as an adult, sort of 25 years later, how much are you to blame for the stupid things that you did when you were a child, even if those stupid things have had really, really awful consequences for people.
Yeah, because they are kind of just silly girls, aren't they, in it? Really?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I wanted to create a kind of friendship group that hopefully most people can relate to in some way, from school. Either, you were part of that group, or you were on the outside seeing that group. The kind of apart from Lucy, the others are very much part of a kind of a cool gang that she longs to be part of. They're slightly older than her. She very much sort of wants to fit in. She's at a new school, and she's so excited at the thought that these people want to be her friends. But and again, a perfectly sort of relatable way, understandable way, those girls have sort of secrets of their own, and they're not as perfect as they seem, and sometimes they're quite unpleasant to each other, and it's all those kind of childhood teenage tensions coming out that explode into something much more serious in the book.
When you were writing that, like, how much research did you have to go into for it? Did you know lots about like drama camps and that kind of stuff? Or
I did a bit of research around that. To be honest, the most research probably came around the sort of the Hollywood stuff. We mentioned earlier that there's a strand of the book set in the 1920s and kind of early Hollywood and sort of glamorous parties. And although I had obviously an interest in that because I wouldn't have written about it otherwise, I didn't know that much detail. So I did do some sort of reading around early Hollywood stars and, just stupid things like how much do you get paid if you're a silent movie star in 1925 and things like that, which was actually quite fun to do. And then when it came to the kind of the storyline about them as children, which is 25 years ago, so set in 1999, I guess that's when I was a teenager. So I'd kind of done my research because I was there, but it's all a very long time ago. So I was occasionally Googling like, what was number one in the charts in 1999 and things like that, just to kind of remind myself about what it was like then. But a lot of the kind of school-based stuff is just sort of drawing on, it's obviously not in any way based on my own school, but that kind of generic memory that we all have of sort of growing up and being at school and those kinds of things. And then the present section, there was some research to do around sort of specific aspects of sort of sentencing and crimes as we get later on in the book that will make sense, but not vast amounts of research. It was quite sort of research light in that sense.
Cool. You've also just made me feel really old.
Sorry, what was that?
I said you've also just made me feel really old talking about in 1999.
I was quite an old teenager. In fact, actually, I don't think I was. I was a teenager in the 1990s. By 1999, I was no longer a teenager either. So.
Oh, that's fair enough. I was at uni.
Yes, so was I. Me too.
Dating my partner.
Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah, it's weird. It seems like the 1990s seem a long time ago, but also weirdly, like in my head, that's still the present. So I had to kind of consciously be like, no, actually, this is 25 years ago.
Isn't it like now? It's almost like, I think if you write books in the 80s, now it's like historical crime.
Yeah, I know. So weird. I know it's really hard to deal with, isn't it? But it was useful. It was kind of fun finding out, just because the book is set on specific days. I was just sort of checking what was happening on that day in 1999, and kind of there's the whole like millennium bug and all the sort of turn of the century things that now seem like ancient history. But it was fun kind of revisiting some of that stuff. And I guess for me, the temptation is if you do a lot of research, you kind of get a bit sucked into it, and there's the temptation to kind of include stuff in the book because it's kind of fun and you found it out. So I've tried really hard to resist that, which is why I tend to write first and then research a bit later. So by the time you've got a first draft, I guess you have a better sense of the things you need more information on. So I kind of, the Hollywood stuff I wrote, and then I was like, actually, I need to know a bit more about this to make it convincing. And I go back and kind of research that way. Whereas I think I found in the past, especially sort of writing historical crime, you can get kind of distracted by the research because it's all so fascinating, and it can be tempting just to kind of include things for the sake of it. But I don't think that helps the kind of the flow of the story, really.
No, I love historical crime though.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's brilliant, and I love that kind of the transporting you to another world, but that keeping that kind of element of the mystery and the puzzle. So I love reading historical crime and enjoy writing it too. And I guess this is a psychological thriller with a little bit of a historical mystery woven through it, and that kind of reflects my interest in that particular type of crime fiction as well, I think.
So your historical crime that isn't coming out at the moment, what era were you interested in?
It's set in the late 18th century, so the time of the French Revolution, but in this country. So a kind of time of revolution and change, because I think that's quite an interesting sort of setting for a crime series. And obviously at that point, there's not a police force. So you've got this kind of added element of when something bad happens, who's going to investigate. And I think, although like that novel that I wrote before was very different from The Summer Dare, in a way, the thing they have in common is that neither of them are kind of police type novels. There is a police officer in The Summer Dare. He gets a whole chapter from his point of view at some point, but he's not solving the case as such. And I think that's because, although again, I love reading police procedurals, I don't feel like I have the kind of knowledge to be able to write that kind of book, and that really would require a lot of research. So I think probably writing about the 1790s and then writing this kind of book in which the person trying to solve the puzzle is the person to whom the bad things are happening, have that element in common, that neither of them have a kind of official police detective as their main character. They're both sort of protagonists who are trying to work out for themselves, because they have a stake in this, what is actually happening, and trying to bring the truth sort of out into the open.
Yeah, and I see your point about the policing, because I think unless, like, people are so sort of up on crime fiction now, aren't they, that I think that, like, you do have to be accurate with stuff.
Yeah,
like you have to get it right, because people will know.
Exactly. I think if you're going to write that type of crime novel, then you, as you say, if you don't get those details right, then people will get frustrated, and I guess it just takes you away from the story. If you're constantly thinking, well, I don't think that would happen, or that's not very realistic, then you're kind of being drawn away from the story itself, and that's never what you want. And yeah, like I say, I love reading those books, but I just know that I couldn't write one, not without a lot of research and conversations with some friendly police officers anyway.
There are some great friendly police officers who do advice also, so
yeah, no, I've heard about this. And there are some brilliant people out there, which must be great. If you are writing that kind of book, being able to draw on that expertise would be so useful. And maybe, if later down the line I have an idea where I'm like, that has to be a police procedural novel, then I will definitely have to try and draw on the expertise of some of those people.
There's also science advisors, which is really
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So Graham Bartlett, who you might have heard of, he does advice. He has like a team of people who do advice.
Oh, how brilliant.
There's all sorts of people who do it, like there's forensics people. Brian Price is a science advisor, so he'll tell you if you've got your science right.
That's such a good idea.
Yeah, it's quite good.
That's the kind of thing that as a writer you really worry about. And if you're lucky, like I did have questions where, I needed to ask someone else's opinion. And fortunately, I kind of had people, none of them were science questions. I had people that I could ask who could give me a kind of authoritative answer. But I think knowing that there's those people out there, particularly on like the science stuff and things like that. And sometimes you just want to know, what would happen in this scenario if this person did this, what would the result be? And I think being able to draw on that knowledge is so important.
Well, I think you can have bugbears, can't you? So I like science rewriting things. It's one of the things that would put me off if it wasn't.
Yeah.
A little bit. That's mostly because I teach science.
Okay.
So okay. It has to be right. It's like,
yeah, that makes total sense.
It would mess with me if it wasn't. Have you got anything that puts you off? Like if something's wrong in a book, or?
So, like I say, I do read a lot of historical crime, and I guess one thing that I find jarring is a historical detail that's totally wrong. But I think everyone must do it occasionally. And when I tried to write historical crime, I realized how hard it is to be, to kind of tell a story in a way that's engaging for a contemporary audience, but try and be true to kind of the period as well. But if there was some like glaring historical error, then I would probably find that quite distracting, I think. And like I say, it's not that it would spoil the whole book for me at all. I think it's more just that it takes you out of the story momentarily. It's like when you're watching something on TV, something happens where you're like, well, that would never happen. And then you're drawn away from it. And it's that moment of kind of just stepping back that I think that spoils it temporarily. And I guess the other thing, I think it's about anything that just distracts you from that feeling of the best feeling in the world is having a book that you're really absorbed in and you're sort of really engaged with. And if something makes you step away from that, that's just a shame. And like you say, there'll be different things for different people, I'm sure.
Yeah, which is why we all like different things, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's always a good thing to ask. And I'm realizing that because you're new, we can ask you all of our favourite questions.
Okay, brilliant.
But like you won't have been asked before because you've never been on with us.
Exactly, I've never been asked any questions.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like I can just go and ask you all the old questions that you liked as well. One of my favourite ones when we started doing this thing of doing the author chats is, would you make a graphic novel version of your book?
Ooh, that's a good question too. I would love to, but I am the world's worst drawer, as anyone who knows me will know. So I would have to get someone else to. If someone else could create a graphic version of my book, that would be brilliant. And I actually think I love looking at graphic novels. And someone a few years ago now got me a graphic version of an Agatha Christie novel. I'm a big Christie fan, and it was just so interesting seeing the sort of same story laid out in a totally different way. So yeah, I would absolutely love that. That'd be brilliant.
There's a graphic novel kind of biography of Agatha Christie as well.
Ooh, that sounds great. I'm gonna have to have a look for that.
Yeah, I love graphic novels. It's one of the reasons I love them.
Yeah, it's a different way of engaging with the story, isn't it? And it's a different part of your brain as well, which I think is interesting. And it's kind of just a really visual medium, which I think, for the plot of The Summer Dare, there's quite a lot of kind of quite visual moments, and I think it would be interesting to sort of see what happened to those in a graphic version of it.
It is. I also like the way that you've got throughout, because there's like little moments, isn't there, with text messages and things like that are like quite clear kind of throughout the story. They're like marked out. Even in like my Kindle version, it comes.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's great. I think that's something that Hero and Canelo do in all their books, and I agree. It's just that familiarity, because we're also used to like seeing those exchanges on our phones, kind of WhatsApp groups and messages and stuff. And I think if you see them in the same format, especially actually seeing them on a Kindle screen, there's something quite cool about that, because it just feels sort of very, very realistic. And there are quite a few exchanges. This is a kind of a tight friendship group that spends quite a lot of time messaging each other, but also there are some messages that are causing Lucy to feel quite alarmed that are also a key part of the story. So messages are quite important to the plot as a whole.
So my other favourite question to ask is, what have you read this year and really enjoyed?
Oh my goodness, that's so hard to know where to start. I've read an awful lot of psychological thrillers, because now that I've started writing them, I guess I'm kind of keen to just get as much experience as I can of what's out there. And again, one of the brilliant things about getting published has been that advanced copies of my book have gone out to sort of other authors who've really generously and kindly read them and provided me with some lovely quotes. And so I've been kind of reading their books as well, because I just wanted to sort of get more familiar with their work. So I've read some great books by Alex Chowdhury, for instance, Sarah Clarke, Sophie Flynn, Lisa Hall, who I don't know whether you've interviewed in here, but has written this great kind of time traveling detective series, which I've really enjoyed. She's got 2 books out now. I've read both of those this year and loved both of them. So yeah, it's so many things. like I said, I've been specializing in psychological thrillers. So I also just read, I think, Catherine Faulkner's book, The Other Mothers, which was her follow-up to Greenwich Park, which I enjoyed last year, and that was also very good. So yeah, a whole host of brilliant psychological thriller fiction at the moment is what I'm specializing in.
And do you have, while you're at it, we call them, I call them like my shut up and take my money authors. Do you have authors that are the ones where it doesn't matter what they've written? Like, you're not going to read the back of it in the bookshop. You just see their name on it and it's going in your basket. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. That's a really good way of describing it. You're right. It's just like, I want this book because you've written that. I guess one of the sort of crime writers who I feel like that about, and who I've sort of liked their fiction for a long time, is Ellie Griffiths. So anything she writes, I would definitely buy. Lauren North and Simon Brett, both of whom have been massively supportive of this book. Again, anything by them, I just want to read. So, there's a kind of, that you're right. There are some people where you're just like, whatever you come up with next, that's going to be my read. There's something really satisfying about that. I think the excitement of knowing that you're going to sort of enjoy that book is a brilliant thing.
Have you read her short story collection, Ellie Griffith?
No, I haven't yet, actually. I'm looking. Have you read it?
Yes, because I talked to her about it last weekend in the group, and it's really good.
Okay, I shall definitely get that then. Yeah, I liked both the Brighton series and the kind of the Ruth Galloway one, and also the kind of the standalone ones as well. So yeah, the short stories is pretty much the only thing I think I haven't read, actually. So I should definitely get that. And it's great that they're out there. Short stories don't, so they don't get, you don't get that many kind of crime short stories, I don't think. So it's quite exciting to have them.
And they're really good. I like her. Sorry, I was looking for something on the side of my shelf. I really like her Justice series.
Oh, is that the young adult one? I haven't actually read any of those. I'd love to.
I think this one will be signed because it's on my shelf. But it's I love these ones. They're really good. They're just like the kind of books I wanted to read when I was at school.
Yeah, and I love reading young adult stuff sometimes as well. So that sounds like I should definitely be getting those.
You can't go wrong with a young adult book.
No, the plots are usually really, really strong, I think.
Yeah, well, I think anything that Ellie writes is great, but yeah. That's good. Yeah, good chat and thank you, many authors. Well done. Good list.
Well, I've read some really good stuff this year, and I always have a book on the go. So I feel like I've got, although it's only July, I feel like I've got through quite a few already, and I've got a great big pile of books ready to read as well. So that's
yeah. I'm looking at my giant pile of books.
I'm guessing you.
We're talking. We do, but then the problem that you get when you do these interviews is if you do them kind of one a week. I think I've got 2 next week. You kind of have to you have to read something for those. So sometimes you're like, your pile of books that you buy and the pile of books that you need to read are like 2 different.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that must be really hard, just fitting in all the other ones around all the ones you definitely have to read. Yeah. But fun, to read some great stuff as part of that.
Yeah, no, it's really fun, and you get to read some great stuff and discover loads of great new authors like you. And then someday you're going to have like one of these chats going on and someone will list your name as like the
that would be amazing.
Like the authors they must buy. So yeah, it's really good. The downside is that like I'm looking at books that I bought that I want to read that are kind of just going to sit there for a while.
Yeah, I know. I guess the thing is you always get around to them eventually. It's just kind of the order in which you read things, but eventually everything will get read.
I do. My new way of doing that is to invite people to come for author chats.
Okay.
So I'm not for books. Like
that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it works really well.
I love that.
I know it's an excellent strategy. Is your book out on audio as well?
No, there's no audiobook version. That would be amazing. So yeah, it would be really exciting to sort of hear it read out loud. But at the moment, it's just a paperback and ebook.
Is there a plan for an audio? Because I know we have lots of people in our group who like it.
I don't think so, but I also am a big fan of audiobooks. I like listening to them when I'm driving, and sometimes when I'm running as well. And yeah, I think they're a great way to sort of to read different books. I've just finished. Lauren North wrote a book called Clickbait earlier this year, which I just listened to an audiobook, and that was absolutely brilliant. It works really well in the audiobook format because of the nature of the story, and it's got all these kind of extracts from podcasts and from reality TV shows and stuff, and having it in that format was just absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Cool. Yeah, I would imagine something but this would work really well because you've got like that team of people, and if you had different people like narrating it.
Yeah, I think it would work well because, as you say, it's told from different perspectives, mainly from Lucy's own perspective, but there are definitely other voices in there, and I think it would be quite interesting to sort of hear that and kind of build up the kind of developing sense of a different picture and different versions of the truth. I think might come across, as you say, quite nicely with different voices.
It's other people's side sort of stories that I'm really interested in as well. There's like I'm going to get the names all wrong, but there's a lady who has like the really Instagrammable.
Oh yeah, Hayley. So yeah, she's a kind of influencer with her own Instagram account, and again, a seemingly perfect life, but definitely some sort of secrets bubbling away under the surface.
Yeah, there's all sorts going on with her, and I'm like, I could read a whole book just about Hayley.
She was actually quite fun to write. I enjoyed. She was a fun character to create. She kind of morphed from a very kind of cool teenager into this. I think a fundamentally likable but capable of being quite annoying adult who has got these kind of big things that she's not telling anyone else, and who is maybe not quite as confident as she initially comes across. So yeah, she was a fun character to write about. I think hopefully all four of them were. So it's kind of Lucy and Hayley, and then there's two other friends, Claire, who's a kind of quite serious lawyer, and Jana, who's kind of this sporty, sort of confident person, but again, with lots and lots of things that she's keeping buried under the surface.
The kids are kind of quite incidentally funny as well, aren't they?
That's good. I wanted a bit of, although it deals with some quite dark things, I wanted to have some humor in there as well. And I think, yeah, the children are the source of that humor, especially Hayley's children, who are quite badly behaved, who she doesn't keep very good control of.
Yeah, there's a moment where one of them's like dumping jam on the head of another one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've hung out with lots of small children recently, so they've inspired me into writing some.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like that's a thing that a small child has done somewhere.
Definitely.
I don't hang out with small children, but like I can imagine.
Yeah, it's very much inspired by some of the things that the children do. But yeah, I think I wanted the kind of the lightness of some of those moments as well, because I guess in some ways I want it to be a world that people want to be in, because I think one of the things I find interesting about psychological thrillers is that kind of what if element of, what if that was me? So these characters have lives that seem like quite nice lives and are quite nice lives, but because of something that happened to them a very long time ago, all of that is about to kind of get ripped up and change profoundly. But I kind of wanted to create that lightness and that kind of fun as well, because there is fun in their world. It's just it's all about to go wrong for them.
Yeah, and I think that makes it more realistic.
Yeah, I hope so.
And you're only going to buy into a book if it's like fairly realistic. You need to sort of believe the people and the events to get drawn into like a psychological thriller, especially. I
think that's true. I think because sometimes in the course of the plot, various quite dramatic, dark things will happen. I think you've got to start from believing that world. You've got to have a fundamental faith that these characters are living lives that people actually live, which hopefully is what comes across in The Summer Dare. They've got these sort of lives that people will be able to sort of relate to, but they've also done something that's going to sort of make those lives implode.
Yeah, no, that definitely comes across. Like they're really relatable.
Good. I'm really glad. It's good
Like
to hear.
you sort of believe them as people.
Yeah, that's good, and that's what I wanted, and like them as people as well. I think all of them, none of them are kind of unpleasant characters. They're all sort of likable characters, and I think again, there's something interesting there about likable people might still have done bad things and things that they don't even recognize anymore, or again, it's that you did something when you're a child, and are you even the same person 25 years later? Probably you would argue not, but you literally did those things in the past, and sometimes there's no escaping from that.
There's some quite dramatically awful people around them, though, isn't there? There's like in
There
their
are.
families and um, things like that. I think are quite, I don't want to say like not as likable.
There are some unlikable characters in it, and some slightly disturbing characters in it. And again, that's part of the kind of what ultimately is going on here, because to what extent did they create their own kind of disaster, and to what extent are some of those other people around them involved in what actually happened? And hopefully, as you get towards the end, it'll kind of become clear how those pieces fall into place. But yeah, definitely not everyone is likable. There are some characters in there who are quite unpleasant as well.
So we've got a few minutes left. Do you want to remind people what they're going to go away and buy?
Yeah, that'd be great. So this is The Summer Dare. It's a psychological thriller about Lucy and her friends, and 25 years ago, when they were kids, they took part in this summer dare that went horribly wrong, and the consequences are about to hurtle forward and sort of destroy their lives in the present. And you can get it on Kindle, or you can order the hard copy version as well. So yeah, it'd be great. I'd be really excited to hear what people think as well. So do let me know on social media if you're reading it and enjoying it. That'd be great.
We will. I'm going to let you know what I think.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
What I think has happened at the end.
Yay.
Or like when I get near it. Maybe a
okay,
bit.
Yeah, I'd love to know what you think is happening.
I don't
I
think I've got a fully formed theory yet, if that makes sense. Like I keep forming a theory and then I keep thinking, no, that wouldn't, no,
Okay.
right. So I've not quite got an actual.
Yeah, I keep wanting to ask you what you think is happening, but then I realize I can't, because that definitely would involve spoilers. So I'll be
definitely involve spoilers. But yeah, no, I haven't. I don't think I've not fully worked it out yet.
Okay, well, I hope when you get there, it's a satisfying end.
I think it will be. It will. I like I said, I've really enjoyed reading it so far. Quite looking forward to going back to it.
That's really nice.
So, yeah, and thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed taking part, and it's been great chatting to you.
Yeah, you know where we are now as well.
I do. Yeah, no, I'll definitely be tuning in and having a look. So that's great as well. Thank you.